Southwest Airlines strands countless travelers. Immigrants are bused to Kamala Harris in the freezing cold. And Putin says he's willing to negotiate with Ukraine. That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. 4 power substations in Pierce County, Washington were attacked on Christmas Day. This knocked out power for more than 14,000 residents. The Pierce County Sheriff's Office said it is unknown if there are any motives or if this was a coordinated attack on the power systems. The suspects gained access to the fenced area and vandalized the equipment, which caused the fire. Wait. They caused a fire that knocked out power to thousands of residents. And they're calling that vandalism? That's like seeing someone get stabbed in the middle of the street and calling it an act of aggressive jaywalking. This is the latest in a string of attacks on power substations across the U.S. I covered this topic just over a week ago. The link is below. Ironically, the most shocking thing at these electrical facilities is the lack of security preventing these attacks. The Department of Homeland Security warned that this kind of vandalism could keep occurring, carried out by lone offenders and small groups motivated by a range of ideological beliefs and/or personal grievances. Theories on who's doing this range from anti-LGBT protesters to white supremacists. But since this was on Christmas Day, I wouldn't rule out that it could be someone who refuses to watch A Christmas Story one more dang time. Instead of being forced to suffer through a marathon of this mediocre at best movie for the 23rd year in a row, some people would actually prefer shooting their eyes out with a Red Ryder BB gun. Saboteurs weren't the only ones knocking out power in people's homes on Christmas. Winter Storm Elliott spread havoc across the Midwestern and Northeastern U.S., knocking out power to millions of homes. The storm intensified into what's known as a bomb cyclone. A bomb cyclone is caused by a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. It can cause severe winds and blizzards. This bomb cyclone caused dozens of deaths across the U.S., with many of them occurring around Buffalo in western New York, which saw its worst blizzard in decades. The county executive said it was a continual blizzard and whiteouts, such that no one could see where they were going. Nobody had any idea what was happening. We had to send specialized rescue crews to go get the rescuers. They had to send a rescue team to rescue the rescue team. That'd be like sending firefighters to fire firefighters for not fighting fires. I'm just glad they didn't need to send rescuers to rescue the rescuers rescuing the rescuers. If trying to process that is overheating your brain, you're welcome for the extra free warmth. Several people froze to death in their cars while stranded on snow-covered roads, and a driving ban was put into place to prevent more of these casualties. I guess when the houses look like this, cars don't really stand a chance. The massive blizzard caused airlines to cancel thousands of flights. Southwest canceled or delayed nearly half of their flights. And even after the storm cleared up, Southwest still canceled even more of their flights. Their phone systems were overwhelmed, leaving countless travelers stranded with no way of getting a hold of Southwest to rebook or even get their bags, which were sent ahead without them. Wow, I can't believe that this once-in-a-generation winter storm made Southwest Airlines operate the same way it always has. You'd have better odds of finding a working soft-serve machine at McDonald's than getting to where you're going flying Southwest. Southwest Airlines canceled 70% of their flights on Monday and 60% on Tuesday. They also announced they'd only be operating a third of their flights for the remainder of the week. They said this was because storms had left their crews and planes out of place. However, other airlines averaged between 0 and 2% cancellations by this point. This is like someone showing up late to work in New York City this week and blaming it on 9/11. Pretty sure the window for that excuse closed a while ago. The real reason seems to be that Southwest's scheduling software is so outdated it couldn't handle so many cancellations. They literally could not keep track of where their planes, pilots, and crews were. The U.S. Department of Transportation said these delays, cancellations, and lack of customer service were unacceptable, and they would investigate whether this was controllable and if Southwest violated their customer service plan. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said, "Our department will be holding them accountable for their responsibilities to customers, both to get them through this situation and to make sure this can't happen again." I'm not too confident about anything being done, though, because as someone who's flown with Southwest, I'm pretty sure their customer service plan is just a dirty napkin that says, "Got your money, sucker." This is what you get for flying with an airline that makes Spirit look like, well, all airlines are terrible, but we're still the worst. More after the break. Welcome back. Over 100 illegal immigrants from Texas were sent by bus and dropped off near Vice President Kamala Harris's Washington, D.C. residence on Christmas Eve. Temperatures were as low as 15 degrees Fahrenheit that night. In response to this, Kamala Harris said, "This isn't what I asked Santa for. I told him I wanted Joe to have a little accident with a flight of stairs." The immigrants were originally set to arrive in New York City, but the buses were rerouted due to the weather. They were expected to arrive in Washington, D.C. on Christmas Day, but arrived earlier. They were then bused to a nearby church. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sent several busloads of illegal immigrants to Kamala Harris's residence over the past few months. I covered this tactic of busing immigrants from border towns to liberal cities earlier this year.
Republicans are playing politics with human beings, using them as props. What they're doing is simply wrong. It's un-American. It's reckless.
Yeah. Instead of making a big show of this, you should do it secretly in the dead of night. Considering how many of this week's stories are reruns, it feels less like I'm covering the news and more like I'm hosting one of those year-end best-of clip shows. As you'd imagine, Democrats weren't too happy seeing immigrants, several of whom were children, dropped off in record-low temperatures on Christmas Eve. But in a letter to President Biden a few days before this occurred, Governor Abbott wrote, "Your policies will leave many people in the bitter cold. Dangerous cold as a polar vortex moves into Texas. The need to address this crisis is not the job of border states like Texas. Instead, the U.S. Constitution dictates that it's your job, Mr. President, to defend the borders of our country, regulate our nation's immigration, and manage those who seek refuge here. There is a crisis at the border, but drawing attention to it by dumping illegal immigrants out in the cold on Christmas Eve doesn't feel like the best solution. At the very least, Abbott could have sent them somewhere warm, like Florida. Then again, maybe they were better off out in the cold." Speaking of stories that just keep going, the Twitter files. This week, Twitter files part, honestly, I don't even know anymore. It was so hard to keep track of it that they even stopped numbering them. The point is, the latest revelations are these. First, that Twitter wasn't just being used by the FBI, other government agencies were also encouraging Twitter to censor, including the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA. These were often related to government claims of foreign interference on Twitter, which Twitter executives were pressured to justify, but in at least some cases could not find evidence for. Then there's this thread which shows how Twitter rigged the COVID debate by censoring info that was true but inconvenient to U.S. government policy, discrediting doctors and other experts who disagreed, and suppressing ordinary users, including some sharing the CDC's own data. And Twitter did this under pressure from both the Trump and Biden administrations. The Twitter files have been running for weeks now, and the FBI has been implicated in using Twitter to undermine free speech and suppress information numerous times. The agency finally responded to these allegations by calling this misinformation spread by conspiracy theorists without ever actually denying the allegations. You know, since it's kind of hard to deny when there's so much evidence they lost count of it and stopped numbering them. And if you're wondering what the big deal is about all this, Twitter Files journalist Matt Taibbi summarized it best by saying, if this kind of mechanized speech control can be used one way today, it can be used in another tomorrow, especially if unseen enforcement officials are pushing on the levers. I'm starting to think that Twitter wasn't the most honest company. Thank goodness we still have trustworthy social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram run by Mark Zuckerberg, and TikTok, which has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Social media was a mistake. And after the break, Indian call centers scammed $10 billion from Americans. Welcome back. Illegal call centers based in India scammed over $10 billion from Americans in 2022. The majority of those that fall victim to these scams are the elderly. This is because they're more likely to suffer from cognitive decline and become confused over technological matters. Also, the elderly are the only ones who still answer calls from numbers they don't recognize. I don't even answer calls from people I do know. Send me a text like a normal person. And if you FaceTime me without a heads up, that's an immediate block, you psycho. Speaking of shady entities stealing money from Americans, the IRS. The IRS announced they would delay a new rule by 1 year that would require payment apps like Venmo and PayPal to send forms reporting anyone who receives over $600. This rule would also affect eBay and Etsy users, who claim this makes it harder for them to make a living. The current rule only requires reporting on users that make more than 200 transactions totaling over $20,000. Quit being so cheap, you small business owners. If the IRS doesn't nickel and dime the middle class, including family members sending funds to each other on Cash App, then how are they going to be able to afford to keep letting dozens of the largest corporations in America pay no federal taxes? Won't someone think of Amazon and Nike? The commissioner of the IRS explained their reasoning for delaying this rule by a year, saying the additional time will help reduce confusion during the upcoming 2023 tax filing season and provide more time for taxpayers to prepare and understand the new reporting requirements. They're delaying it to avoid confusion. But being confusing is how the IRS operates. Accountants only exist because taxes are so confusing everyone's afraid of screwing them up. Honestly, this all feels like such a scam, I'm surprised the IRS isn't operating out of a call center in India. Speaking of liars, Republican House Representative-elect George Santos admitted to lying about his education, work experience, and Jewish heritage. He said, "I never claimed to be Jewish. I'm Catholic. Because I learned my maternal family had a Jewish background, I said I was Jewish." The Republican Jewish Coalition put out a statement expressing their disappointment in Santos and saying he wouldn't be welcome at any of their events. I can't blame them. I mean, misrepresenting your heritage? It's enough to bring a tear to the eye of Native Americans like Elizabeth Warren. But here's some good news to end the year on. Russian President Vladimir Putin said he's ready to negotiate with Ukraine and everyone involved over the war in Ukraine that he started. If this sounds familiar, it's because I've covered this more than once. Man, I really am just living in a clip show this week, aren't I? That's why the week between Christmas and New Year's always feels like you're stuck in a weird kind of limbo. The only thing missing is someone who criticized Putin mysteriously falling to their death from a hotel. Oh wait, there it is. What makes this time different is that Putin called it a war for the first time, and not a special military operation, which he kind of had to. Still, calling it a special military operation would be like calling someone getting stabbed in the middle of the street aggressive jaywalking. Putin said he's happy to negotiate, but that Ukraine and their allies were the ones who refused to come to the table. But considering how large Putin's table is he sure they aren't there, or can he just not see them from the other side of it? It's hard to blame Ukraine for not trusting Putin because, well, Putin. But also, Putin made this announcement the day after shelling Kherson, a city in Ukraine, killing 10 people. Also, the day after this offer for negotiations was made, Russia's foreign minister issued an ultimatum saying, "Our proposals for the demilitarization and denazification of the territories controlled by the Ukrainian regime are well known to the enemy. The point is simple, fulfill them for your own good, otherwise the issue will be decided by the Russian army." Russia is still claiming they're doing this to try and fight Nazis and claiming parts of Ukraine belong to Russia. If Putin is trying to project being reasonable and trustworthy, he's not doing a great job of it. So, what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And if you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/America Uncovered. All it takes is as little as $1 or more per episode to fight YouTube's censorship and demonetization. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for joining me in 2022, and I look forward to a great 2023 with you.